One of the things that I'm most thankful for with this channel is obviously you who come back week after week to watch these videos. But a close second would be all of the people within the industry that I've been able to meet through this channel as well, and some of the really cool experiences that I've had because of it. So a few years ago, Chase at Turf Merchants messaged me on Instagram, and since then we've become pretty good friends over the years. So if you don't know, Turf Merchants are not a retailer for seed, but they do produce a bunch of the seed that I have in my own lawn. Pangea ryegrass, Bewitched Kentucky bluegrass, which is mixed in over my side yard, and of course last year's fescue fiasco, where I accidentally seeded some fescue, and there's a couple varieties from Turf Merchants in there as well. So Chase and I have become good friends, and this year he asked me if I'd like to come down to Arizona during the winter time to see what's going on down there at some of the sod farms, go to a couple other very special places as well, which you'll see coming in this series of videos. So it's definitely an opportunity that I didn't want to pass up, and one that you're going to see here in this video. The first part of the trip here was to visit Evergreen Turf. This is one of the major sod producers in the country, and Jimmy Fox is the owner here. Jimmy's going to take us throughout this video on a trip around the sod farm, talk about various things that happen there, and also the field that they're growing for the Arizona Cardinals, which is pretty cool to see some of the things behind the scenes. So we start out here at the Evergreen office, look over some of the warm season grasses that they use, and also look at some of the overseeding that they do as well.
Yeah,
this is such a crazy grass to me.
It's St. Augustine?
Yeah.
So, you know, in Florida, that's the grass. In Southeast Texas, that's the grass. And most homeowners know nothing else other than that grass. Out here, we use it primarily for shade grass because as these neighborhoods, Arizona is a pretty young state. So as these neighborhoods mature, the trees get bigger and your shade lines increase over time. Then the grass that you planted 20 years ago starts dying out. But this is a grass that will grow in that partial shade. And so it's one of the few options we have. And it holds its color pretty good in the inner city where you've got warmer nights. So anyway, it's a great homeowner option. But as you can see, it's pretty spongy. And so if you're a fine texture turf person, this is not for you. Yeah. These other grasses are all Bermuda grasses. Different types. The one I'm standing on is the newest release. This is Tiff Tuff, and its claim to fame was originally its drought tolerance. It looks like Tiffway, the one next to it. The leaf texture is the same. The genetic color is very similar. But what we found is that not only is it more drought tolerant, but it grows better in the cooler weather. So if you actually look at this grass, this section was not overseeded. We painted this once back in November.
Wow. And
this is just the color that we've gotten on this grass with just one application of paint last November. And so genetically, you can see the colors there. It's recovered very well. Whereas the grass that it's designed to replace, this Tiffway, has great color and texture, but you can see it hasn't had the recovery. So it doesn't grow in the cooler temperatures like Tiff Tuff does. So genetically, there's some minor differences that you might not see unless they're right next to each other.
Yep.
Those are two grasses that you can visually see right here. It's hard to see in a pamphlet or you know, on a web page. This is Latitude. It's also a new grass. Its claim to fame is it's very fine textured. It has very good cold tolerance, and as you can see, it's very dense. And it too is greened up very well and has had great recovery. Normally this would be more like Tiff Green, which would be mostly blonde by now. So we actually don't have this available for the homeowners. We're using it to evaluate it for ourselves because we want to see every day ourselves what it looks like.
Right.
So we're kind of using this as our own evaluation plot. This is the main grass that everybody uses in Arizona. This is mid-iron. Now, this year we overseeded both of these because we wanted to try out this new ryegrass from Turf Merchants and see how it compared to what we've been using, which is Evening Shade. And as you can see, there's a little color difference. But the grass that's underneath this is mid-iron, which is a homeowner grass. It's a type of Bermuda grass that's very open. It overseeds very easily, and it transitions well. But the main thing is, the main reason people buy it, it's easy to take care of. It's our number one concern with growing grass in the desert is people want something that's easy because it's 105, 110 in the summer Nobody wants to go out and mow their grass every 2 or 3 days.
Yep.
So ease of maintenance is our #1 selling feature of this grass. But here it's overseeded, and this is why people come to Arizona in the wintertime. They love that look of that perennial ryegrass in the wintertime. Tiff green is a grass that was used back in the 50s and 60s for putting greens. That was the first grass used on putting greens in the United States, and that used to be the standard. Now we use it on golf course fairways and tee boxes. We no longer put it on putting greens. There's new grasses for that. But it's still a great fine textured grass for homeowners if they want to mow with a real mower and get that really manicured look. And it's very fine, very dense. And then finally we have this Tiff Grand, which Tiff Grand was originally developed because it's got some shade tolerance for partial shade. You can grow it where you've got maybe up to 40 to 60% shade. And other Bermuda grasses don't perform very well, but this one still does. And as you can see, it's got pretty good color. It's very dark, but it doesn't have the recovery of, say, the Tiff Tough, because you can see it still hasn't fully recovered from the scalping that we did to it back in October. But the genetic color is very good, but doesn't grow well in cool weather. So anyway, that's what this is for, a little demonstration plot so homeowners can see some of those differences visually and hopefully make a decision for their own yard.
Yeah. After that, we moved on to the actual sod farm itself, and right away, I was completely blown away by the scale of the operation.
Brian, this is some of our greens grasses over here at Tiff Eagle. Where the water's running is Tiff Dwarf. That's all grown on USGA sand. We'll go over there in a little bit. They're actually top dressing the field for some sports turf over there with sand.
It's incredible.
This is all mid-iron, this entire pivot over here. Like I said, that's our biggest consumer grass. We're stockpiling sand over here because we're getting ready to top dress another field over here for some sports field grasses. So all that sand is going to go out in that field. In Arizona, we don't have any sod farms that are on native sand. And because of our high salts on our water and our tight soils, any good golf course or sports field project normally gets plated with sand, some kind of drainage and sand, so they can deal with the salts and compaction issues. So in the last 10 to 15 years, there's been a huge demand for sand-based sod, and it's a pain to grow it. It's expensive to grow it, but it's the right product. You got to match soil types many times. If you put a fine textured soil on top of a coarse textured soil, it's going to slow your drainage down. And if you have salt issues, you can't flush the salts out. You can't move them out. Sand-based sod production has become a big part of what we do for some of these specialized sports fields and golf courses.
So some of the things between warm season grass and cool season grass always surprise me as well, and how quickly warm season grass can regenerate when it's in prime condition.
In an ideal condition, you can get 2 turns a year on a field like this one, on this type of grass, mid-iron. Overall, we average about 1.5 turns, because if you harvest something in the beginning of summer, you might be able to harvest it again at the end of summer. If you harvest it in the winter time, when that grass isn't growing, you're not getting the regrowth, you may not be able to harvest that again until the following year. It just depends on the cycle of growth, cycle of harvest. So on average, we could get 1.5, but we've had fields that we've had 3 and 4 turns on. Those are exceptions, not the rule. Are 450 to 600 pounds the acre. Now this was seeded late, so it got seeded at 600 pounds because we were trying to get it up, get it thick. So this was at 600 pounds, a little heavier than we'd like, but that's the only way you get it to mature enough when it's too cold. Rules of thumb we use is we like to overseed a mature field. The healthier your grass is going into overseed, the healthier it's going to be coming out of overseed. You know, when you look at this, you can see it's got healthy rhizomes. You've got healthy stolons and roots, and that's from the Bermuda grass that we overseeded into. A lot of these nice white roots are from the ryegrass, but as you can see, it's got pretty good sod strength. It takes a little bit to tear that apart. That is what we want is we want to seed into healthy Bermuda grass. We don't want to tear it up too much. Leave plenty of roots and rhizomes so it's got good carbohydrate storage for the springtime. And then when it's time to come out of that overseed and get rid of this ryegrass, you've got healthy Bermuda to recover and grow back next summer. It's hard having two good crops in the same area and have them both 100% healthy. You can't do it for 12 months out of the year. And we'll see later today what we have to do to get rid of this stuff. That machine can cut about 10 to 20,000 square feet an hour, depending on field conditions. So that's state of the art. You have one guy that can operate a machine, pull off 1 to 2 truckloads an hour.
So just like we talk about in our lawns, Jimmy was talking a lot about soil health and how it's such an important part of growing great grass.
We have a saying in the business, roots before shoots. So we focus really on getting the root system back. Because the healthier the roots are, then everything else stems from there. So many times in the turf business, we're focused really on what's on top. That's that's the green, that's the beauty. But people forget that it's a whole lot easier to keep it green and beautiful on top if you've got a good support system underneath. Because a grass system is a lot like an iceberg. 2/3 of it is actually below the ground. And if you don't get that healthy, then you're going to have other problems up above. In the sod business, that's even more true because we can't harvest it if we don't have a good root system. So that aerification and that initial fertilizer is what helps you start rebuild that root system for the next crop.
Many people often wonder how fast this comes out of the field and is actually taken to a yard or to a project. So Jimmy talked a little bit about that as well.
So normally we cut and normally starting between 10 and noon, depending on the time of year. It goes on a truck about 2 to 4 in the afternoon. So we start delivering it between 5 in the evening and 7 the next morning. So we deliver overnight. So by tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., they can start installing, whether it's a homeowner or whether it's us. And that way, what we hope is from field to install is inside a 24-hour window. So all of our sports grasses and our greens grasses, which this is a greens grass over here, this is Tiff Dwarf. We grew all of these on sand so that whether we're harvesting stolons or whether we're harvesting sod, there's no risk of contamination of a finer textured soil or clay getting into a sand-based field. So this is what's left of our sand-based Tiffway, which is a sports grass for golf course fairways, football fields, so on and so forth. And then right next to that, you can see we've harvested this field out. It's been land planed, and now they're top dressing it with sand. So he's coming back with a top dresser, and so we're going to top dress about 1 inch of sand onto this field and get ready to actually replant this field here as soon as it warms up, probably late March or April. So this is sand-based Tiffway. You can see this field is plated with sand. This grass all went to golf course tees or sports fields this winter. And if you look at this compared to the last field we're in, you can see this is actually mowed quite a bit tighter. So we'll mow this at about 1/2 inch or even less. And that way it matches up to the fairway or the tees where we're installing these. Now they've got a nice coarse sand. It won't plug up their drainage. And it's got great footing, and it looks great for the winter time. It matches up to the overseed these guys use.
That's why sand levels so well. You can even tell just like as it goes down, it's all.
And that top dresser's got a brush and a gate, so it puts out a real even amount of sand. And I believe it takes us about 8 passes to get 1 inch of sand.
So then I got to move on to the major field that they're growing there, which is for the Arizona Cardinals. And Jimmy gave us some insight onto how this is grown specifically for the NFL.
This here is stuff that we originally planted for the Arizona Cardinals as part of their custom grow for their field. Everything is specialized in here. It's USGA sand with a special kind of fiber to help with footing. And then we also do the grass for the Raiders. So we've got this area set aside plus another area over here, about another 10 acres. And it's very specialized the way we grow this. But you talk about footing, the Bermuda grass has got to be good. We have it grown on sand to match up with their profile. But this stuff also has these little fibers mixed in here. And we put these fibers in the sand so that as the field begins to wear, the roots grow into this stuff. And even if it loses the grass on the surface from the traffic and the cleats, it will still hold together and give them good footing even without a lot of turf on top. And you don't see this even in most NFL fields. It's kind of unique to what we do for the Cardinals and the Raiders.
Yeah,
that is some tough grass. So we cut this to about 1 3/4 when we do an in-season resod so that they can play on it right away. Some people call it instant play sod. A lot of different names for it. Ours is called Stay Lock because of the fiber reinforcement. These are Stay Lock fibers. But typically our grass will be about 18 months old. And that way we know it's mature enough to handle the traffic of NFL play. Of all the sports, soccer, golf, baseball, rugby, NFL is by far the hardest game on grass. And so you've got to reach a certain standard of maturity before you'll get the footing and the playability and the wearability to go through a whole season of football. Mm-hmm. And typically we'll get about 8 games out of this stuff before we have to resod. And you'll see in some places people may only get 4 or 5 games out of their sod. Having that kind of maturity in those fibers grown in specialized sand just allows us to produce a more durable product. And as you can see, even though this hasn't been mowed for a while, our normal mowing height is pretty tight.
Yep.
Below 1/2 inch. And there's those fibers I was talking about.
Yeah, that's
the roots
really
just grow
cool.
right into those. What we don't use for mid-season repair then gets used in the spring, following spring or next fall. And so we don't need this ryegrass anymore. So now we've got to get rid of it as soon as possible because the Cardinals will run their summer camp on their main stadium field. And so in August, we'll have to go in and repair that field. And this grass will have to be ready for that with no ryegrass in it, 100% Bermuda grass. So we've already sprayed this out with a product that will kill the ryegrass and then allow us to get this Bermuda grass back even faster and ready for the late summer resod. Mm-hmm. So that's why this is off color right now.
Of course, a lot of people down south have issues with POA, so I did ask Jimmy as well some of his thoughts on POA and how they deal with that at the Sod Farm.
So when we started our farm, one of the goals we had was to have a POA-free farm. And if you overseed enough times, you're gonna have POA. Whether it comes to the seed or it blows in, because you're watering so much in the fall when you have perfect germination environment for POA, you're gonna have POA. So what you have to do is start a regimen or routine of ways to manage it early. One of the ways we do it is we try not to overseed the same field 2 years in a row. And there's a saying in the business, the best herbicide for POA is a sod cutter. You know, you cut it out, remove it, you don't have to deal with it anymore. But so for us, we're constantly taking this ground and transplanting it. So we're starting with a fresh field. A little easier for us to start with a POA-free field, but what happens is on our edges that never get harvested, they stay the same every year, they get watered, and so what we have to do is start with a pre-emergent program. The best way to get ahead of POA is to pre-emerge it. And one of the things that we'll do if we do see POA and we can catch it early is we'll actually have people go out and hand weed a field. And because the best way to take care of it is to catch it early, hand weed it before it goes to seed, before it becomes self-seeding, and just pull it. Mm-hmm. And that sounds old school, it sounds like a lot of work, but it's still the best method. Especially if you're starting a new lawn or reseeding or overseeding like this, one of the other areas of prevention is starting with clean seed. And in order to start with clean seed, you kind of need to know who your seed producer is, know that they're reliable, and then also look at your seed test. And one of the things that we've always required from our grower is they provide us 2 large tests from each seed lot to help us know that what we're getting is POA free. In this day and age, you may never get a true 100%, but you minimize it. You've got to know who your grower is in order to rely on that. So it starts with clean seed.
I didn't get to really do a sit down here with Jimmy and get the entire story of how he got into this kind of operation, but he did talk a little bit about his humble beginnings with the Sod Farm and how far it's come over the years.
So our goal was just to turn out a high quality landscape sod. And we said, hey, it'll take us 4 or 5 years, before we sell anything to our first golf course. And our first customer ended up being a golf course. We sold them their sprigs before our farm, before we were even mowing grass on our first field. Our first customer was a golf course, our second customer was a golf course, our third big customer was a golf course. And so we started doing golf work from day one, when really we were oriented towards doing landscape business. But that just shows you what the demand for high quality turf was even back 20 years ago. And that demand has only grown more since that period. So when we started, though, it was just mid-iron, Tifway, and Tif Green, just the 3 basic grasses. The NFL grass is the most expensive grass that we sell, and sports fields and NFL grass wasn't even on our radar when we started. And so it's just kind of evolved. But one of the things you do is you, if you're customer oriented, is you grow or you make the product that your customers want, your customers demand, and that's what we've done. Is we've just been sensitive to what the customer demands are in this market. And in Arizona, in reality, the grass business is not that big a part of the overall landscape palette. You can't afford to be real picky on who your customers are. So if you want a bigger portion of this market, you really need to pay attention and devote yourself to all those different customers. So we do everything from high-end football fields to your mom and pop backyard, and the play area for the kids. And hopefully the goal is to turn out a quality product for any one of those customers, regardless of which scale they're at and what their demands are. They're all different, and we try to grow a product that meets each one of those demands.
One of the major questions you're probably also wondering about, and I was very curious about when I was there, about irrigation and how they kind of look at that in the Arizona heat.
And the amount of water that comes into this farm is measured, the amount of water that goes onto these fields is measured, and we have a weather system that allows us to monitor the amount of evaporation daily. And so we try to mirror what goes down according to the evaporation that's coming off, so that we're not overusing water, but we're also not stressing the plant by not giving it enough water. And so it's a daily monitoring of that. And you'll see a few puddles here and there, but you don't see water running out of these fields. So that means we're never applying more than what the soil can take. And it's very important in this business because our water is our most precious resource in Arizona. So we have to be sensitive to that daily. You'll see that, the reason we brought in grasses like Tif Tuff that we looked at this morning is because it uses less water than other commercially available grasses. And so it becomes important for us to continue to look for the best grasses and the best systems to be able to manage those resources.
As we moved along the farm here, we finally got to a really green section, which of course is the overseeded ryegrass, and I would call this Ryegrass Heaven for me. This was my favorite part of seeing the Sod Farm. Obviously everything was really green and looking great because of the weather, and so I got a chance to go out there and see a large amount of overseeded ryegrass. Now coming up in part 2, we're going to be going to a very special place, which was the Arizona Cardinals Stadium. We're going to talk with the groundskeeper there about what he's doing with the field right now currently, what he's kind of done in the past with it at this time of year, and how that's different because of what's going on in the world right now. There's going to be a lot of insight there that he shared with us, so stay tuned for part 2.